here in Florida, which is actually a really good time to work on your car. Okay, so pretty much got all the parts we need to do the gear. We have the ring and pinion, comes with the new crush collar, got our gear oil, two quarts of that, some friction modifier, a new pinion bearing. So yeah, we pretty much have everything we need to do the gear. So what you got to do basically to start is you're going to want to pull the brakes off, pull your drive shaft off. You're going to want to pull off your rotors. You're going to do your diff cover. You're going to pull that off. You're going to drain all the oil, pull the diff cover off, and from there you're going to want to pull. There's a bolt. Well, I'll pick it back up when I get that out, so I can show that. Like I said before, I'm not going to go into too much detail on doing a gear swap because there's so many of those videos online, so I don't think I'd be teaching anybody anything. I might actually show people how to do it the wrong way. I don't know. So anyway, we'll pick it back up when I get everything taken apart and get the carrier out. Okay, so here's a tool I made a few years ago for hooking to your pinion. It's just a piece of angle iron with a notch cut out here and 2 holes, and that goes on your pinion. You bolt it to your pinion like so, and you can get the nut off or do your crush collar, and this bar will stop on the ground, and you can put some good torque on it. So yeah, pretty simple little tool to make. Just go to the Home Depot or Harbor Freight or wherever they sell that angle iron, and you just cut a notch in it in 2 holes, and it helps out a lot getting your pinion nut off and back on. All right, so we got the brakes off, pulled off the rotors, and this gives you a better idea of the parking brake setup I was talking about. It's just basically a little drum brake, kind of like you see on trailers. So okay, and we got the drive shaft off. Got that just laying off to the side. I should be able to do it without totally removing it from the transmission. That way I won't lose any fluid out of the tranny. Got the diff cover off. And here's the bolt I was talking about. Right here. That you have to remove that bolt. Then this pin will come out. And once this pin comes out, you can move the axles in just a little bit and the C-clips will fall out. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and we'll get the axles moved out and start unbolting the carrier. All right, I got the 2 caps off, and what you want to do is just what I do is I'll just set them, whichever cap came off of which side, I'll just set it on that side on the ground and just leave it there so that you put them back in the same spot. So this carrier is ready to come out. So yeah, you're gonna have shims. There's gonna be a shim here and a shim here. It's hard to focus. And you can just leave those in there or take them out and set them with the race, because you can have a race that comes out of there too. You want to keep those on the same side. So I just set them on the ground, on their proper side. And then you can either just leave the shim in there or take it out, and just make sure you don't get them mixed up. So we got the gear and the pinion out on the bench here. So these are the bolts you're going to be taking off to replace the ring gear. The bearing that we're going to have to remove off on with my press is here, and
probably I'm gonna go ahead and replace it with this one, but there's a shim that's gonna be in between these two, okay? You wanna make sure you know that doesn't get stuck to the bearing and you don't see it or misplace it or whatever. So yeah, this is what you would use to remove this bearing here. It's this bearing splitter. It just goes basically right over this, and you make sure it seats underneath the bearing itself. Then you take it over to a press and you just press this right off while this is being supported, and that'll take it off.
All right, so you're basically pressing it off just like this.
Okay, so the bearing didn't survive, which is okay. Basically what we were after was this shim. The shim is what's important. So we're just gonna go ahead and press the new bearing on to the new pinion with this shim, and then we should be ready to go. All right, got the new bearing on, put the shim on, and we're ready to go press it on.
Do it. You got your little stands here that you just flip in. You know, you use the grooves to put the pinion into, and there's the old bearing that's flipped around. Basically, I like to use a block of aluminum here. Just so I don't damage any of the teeth on the gear, and that's it. Then you just press it down. And you can feel it stopping. So once you feel it stopping, then you know you're all the way down.
I slide that back in the housing. I usually just put a little gear oil around the bearing itself, and before I slide it in there.
Okay, so here's a little bit of an idea how I do the crush collar on these 8.8s. You just use your little piece of angle iron that I had made and put it on there. It goes up against the ground, and then you slowly just ratchet it. I put an extension on it. I just use the jack handle. So yeah, anyway, that's how I do that. And just make sure you don't go to the gym that day and start wrenching on it. It takes a little while, so just take your time. All right, so we got that tightened up. I know you're supposed to use an inch torque wrench to check the inch pounds on the, you know, the tension on this, but I just go by feel. And then when it feels like it's dragging a little bit, but still pretty easy to move, that's where I stop. And I know it's probably not the right way to do it, but that's the way I'm doing it. I recommend you get a inch torque wrench, and do it that way, but I don't have one, so it's the way I'm gonna do it. So now we're just gonna unbolt the ring gear and put the new one on. Gear on, and we torque that down with our precision torque wrench. Again, guys, don't do what I do. Make sure you get a good torque wrench and do it right. Shimming the diff. If you've never shimmed a diff, then you haven't lived life. It's so much fun. So you have to just, you know, add or subtract shims here behind the bearing race in order to get your proper backlash, which we're going to measure that. Actually, we're going to use a dial gauge to measure that. But anyway, next step. All right, so here's a little tip on how I set the backlash on this. When I first took it apart, I measured the two shims that were in the driver's side and the passenger side, and they came out, one with the driver's side was 276 and the passenger was 283. So when I did doing the 410 gear, it made the backlash too tight. So I guess the gears are a little thicker. So basically I have to subtract from here and add it to here. Okay,
in order to get the carrier to move this way, you have to subtract from this side and take from here. So that's what we did. And you want to make sure that when you're doing that, when you take shims away from here and put them here, just, you know, if you're adding different shims, you know, putting just to get your backlash set correctly, just make sure that when you measure them, when you remeasure your new shim or your new stacks of shims, that they equal the same as when you first took it apart. And the reason being is you don't want to change your preload on the carrier bearings unless you're changing the carrier bearings. If you change the carrier bearings, then you're gonna have to redo that. But if you're not changing the carrier bearings, you want your shims to total the thickness of your new setups. So that way you know you'll have your same preload on the carrier bearings. I remeasured these after I made my adjustments, and now instead of 276 it measures 229, and instead of 283 this one measures 330. So if you take those two measurements and add them together, come up with 559, which is 559, which is what it was originally. So you see there, all you're doing is you're moving the carrier over a little bit. You're not changing the preload on the carrier. So hopefully you understand that. It's just something I wanted to point out, and will help you out doing your gear. All right, we got the carrier back in, and we checked the backlash, and I'm getting around 8 thousandths of backlash, which I guess the tolerances is between 8 and 12 thousandths backlash. So we're on the low side, 8 thousandths, but after this all wears in, that'll loosen up a little bit, and which should put us in a good range. Okay, so yeah, that's gonna complete this little 8.8 gear swap. I'm not gonna really film putting it all back together. I mean, I got the axles back in, and I have my helper here helping me. What do you think, Maddie? Maddie? She's a little camera shy. But yeah, hopefully this helps somebody, and helps you guys get your, get started in the right direction. Like I said, there's a lot of videos out there on how to do this. That's why I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on it. Just kind of lazy. But anyway, like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.